They showed up before dawn. 5 men in fake uniforms, fake badges, and real guns. Said they were from the HOA. My first thought? Wrong house? My second? They just walked into a veterans' war zone. I'm done fighting overseas. But I'll defend my land right here. Asterisk, asterisk. When I left the Navy, I promised myself 2 things. No more orders and no more noise. I'd spent half my life chasing commands shouted over gunfire, trying to keep people alive who sometimes didn't want saving. The day I signed those discharge papers, I felt like I'd stepped out of a storm and into sunlight for the first time. I bought a ranch 3 counties south of nowhere, 120 acres of uneven grass, 1 cracked barn, and a house built by hands that believed in wood more than steel. The realtor thought I was crazy. I thought I'd found peace. Out here, mornings start slow, the kind of slow that feels earned. Coffee boils on a gas stove older than I am. Goats complain like clockwork, and the silence has weight to it that you learn things about silence. It isn't empty. It's patient. It listens. After years of sand and sirens, I needed something that didn't talk back. My neighbors kept to themselves. The nearest store was 15 miles out, and my only audience was a dog named Max, who thought every sunrise was a miracle. For the first time in decades, I slept without my boots next to the bed. I built fences, repaired roofs, and learned that muscles can heal just like minds, slow and steady. Some nights I'd sit on the porch with a beer and watch the light drain out of the fields, thinking maybe this was it. Maybe I'd finally outrun the part of me that only knew how to fight. But the thing about peace is, it doesn't last when someone decides it shouldn't. It started small, a shift in rhythm, a ripple in routine. The dogs barked one morning at something along the fence. I walked out, still in my flannel and boots, coffee steaming in one hand. That's when I saw it. A white plastic sign zip-tied to my gate. Asterisk. At first, I laughed. HOA? Out here? The closest subdivision was 20 miles east, and even they couldn't keep raccoons out of their trash cans. I figured some kid printed a prank from the internet. But the sign looked official. Logo, barcode, serial number, everything. Someone had gone through trouble. I stood there, wind sliding through the grass, dogs pacing behind me. I told myself to ignore it, tossed the sign in the burn barrel, and watched the plastic melt down to nothing. But something about the whole thing gnawed at me. Not fear, something colder. The kind of alertness you don't lose after years in uniform. Out here, silence tells you when it's holding its breath. And that morning, standing by my fence with smoke curling from the barrel, I felt it, a pause in the air, like the land itself was waiting for the next move. And somewhere deep down, so was I. Asterisk. The next morning, I was fixing the east fence when I saw the dust trail first. A silver SUV, too clean for dirt roads, rolled down my gravel like it owned the place. Windows tinted, paint the color of hospital walls. I leaned against the post, hammer still in hand, and waited. The SUV stopped halfway up the drive, like she wanted me to walk the rest of the way. Then the door opened, and out stepped a woman straight from a corporate brochure. Pastel pink blazer, khaki slacks pressed so sharp they could have cut paper, and mirrored sunglasses big enough to hide behind. She didn't look around, didn't take in the view, didn't smell the air. She looked straight at me like she was checking boxes on a clipboard. "Morning," she said brightly, walking closer. Beautiful property you've got here. I nodded once. Helps when no one's trespassing on it. Her smile twitched, but didn't break. She reached into her bag and pulled out, you guessed it, a clipboard. Corinne Simmons, she said, offering her hand. Homeowners Association President, Simmons Valley. I blinked. Simmons Valley? Lady, that's 20 miles east. She nodded like I'd confirmed her suspicion. Actually, we've expanded our oversight zone to include the rural parcels adjacent to the East Ridge. You're part of the valley now. I laughed, couldn't help it. Ma'am, this is farmland. We've got cows, not covenants. She didn't flinch. Our bylaws include fencing height, structure type, livestock ratio, and acceptable noise levels. Noise levels? Yes, we've had complaints. I looked around at my open fields. From who? The goats? Her smile returned, polished and empty. We take all reports seriously. Then she handed me a manila envelope, the kind lawyers love and ranchers never trust. The label said, welcome packet, action required. Inside were aerial photos of my land, diagrams of my barn. Even a shot of my satellite dish with the note, visible from Southern View Corridor, non-compliant. That got my attention. Those photos weren't taken from the road. I asked her, you been on my property? Publicly accessible areas only, she said. Right, and the Southern View Corridor, that's behind the barn, on my private fence line. She hesitated, just for a heartbeat, then smiled again. We use drone verification for visual assessments. I stared at her. You spying on me with drones now? She adjusted her sunglasses. It's called community oversight, Mr. Callahan. Mr. Callahan, we're simply ensuring everyone maintains standards. I leaned closer. And what happens if I don't? Her smile widened. Then you'll receive a citation notice. Possibly a fine. Maybe a corrective order. That's when I saw it. Not in her words, but in her eyes. Control. She wasn't enforcing anything real. She was playing authority. Clipboard command. Bureaucratic theater. Well, I said, I appreciate the visit. Corinne. But unless you're carrying a real badge or a court order, you can take your clipboard and your standards back to the city. Her lips pressed together, the first crack in her mask. Non-cooperation, she muttered as she jotted something down. We'll note that. Then she spun on her orthopedic heels, walked back to her SUV, and drove off without another word. I opened the envelope right there, flipping through the nonsense. 30 pages of made-up bylaws, signature lines, and fake seals that looked like they'd been printed at a UPS store. Most people would have laughed. I didn't, because the thing about authority, real or fake, is that it only needs one thing to work. People who believe in it. And something told me Corinne wasn't done trying to make me believe. I tossed the packet onto the porch table and went back to my fence. But the hammer felt heavier in my hand that day. Not because I was tired, because somewhere deep down, I already knew this wasn't the last I'd see of her dot out here. Trouble doesn't knock on the door. It drives right up your driveway, smiling with a clipboard. Asterisk 2 days passed after Corinne's little field trip. I figured that was the end of it, some bored suburban queen playing sheriff until she found another hobby. But then the signs came back. Not one, not two. 6 of them, Dot. They were bigger this time, laminated, printed in color, nailed waist-high along my fence line. Property under enforcement review. violations pending. And my favorite? Compliance Phase 2 initiated. It looked like someone was trying to turn my ranch into a construction zone for paranoia. I tore everyone down before lunch, tossed them in the burn barrel, and went back to mending fence. Half an hour later, Max started barking, the kind of bark that isn't curious. It's the kind that says someone's here. I looked up and froze. 2 men were walking along my property line, matching khaki vests, walkie-talkies clipped to their shoulders, and dead center on their chests, iron-on patches that read HOA Patrol. They moved like they'd practiced it, one scanning the fence, the other taking notes on a clipboard. It was absurd, but not funny. They were trespassing, and they acted like they knew exactly where they were. I walked toward them slowly, boots crunching gravel. "Something I can help you boys with?" Both froze, like deer that had just realized the headlights weren't stopping. The taller one tried to look official. "Sir, we're conducting a compliance sweep under HOA protocol." "Compliance sweep," I repeated. "Got a warrant?" He blinked. "We operate under the Simmons Valley Charter." I smiled. "Then you're trespassing under the Callahan Property Charter, which means you've got 10 seconds to start walking." The short one shifted his weight, nervous. "We're just doing our job," he said. "Good," I said. "Do it somewhere else." They exchanged looks. Then, as they turned to leave, one of them dropped his clipboard. Paper scattered across the dirt. He didn't bother to pick it up, just walked faster toward their SUV, parked down the road. I knelt down and gathered the papers. At first, I thought it was more nonsense. Maps, property lines, official-looking diagrams. Then I saw it. My land was marked with a red X underneath, in neat typed letters. Alpha, high resistance. My stomach went cold. There were other properties listed. 2, Bravo, Delta, Gamma. Each one labeled with short notes. Compliant, under review, pending eviction. Someone had made a hit list for homeowners. That night, I called Langston, an old friend who'd gone from Army MP to county sheriff. He hadn't heard of any HOA operating under that name. But when I mentioned Corinne, he sighed. "Oh, yeah," he said. "She's been a problem before. Last year, she tried to file a noise complaint against a rooster." I rubbed my temples. "So she's delusional?" He paused. Persistent might be a better word. After we hung up, I couldn't sleep. Every sound outside felt sharper. The creak of the barn door, the wind brushing the tin roof. You spend enough years in combat, your body never forgets how to listen out around midnight. I stepped out onto the porch. The air was cool, the stars sharp enough to cut. In the distance, I saw faint light flickers, moving, rhythmic. Not headlights. Flashlights. I watched for a full minute. 2 beams moving in sync along the north fence line. Then they vanished. I didn't chase them. Didn't yell. Didn't even grab the rifle. I just watched and waited, because that's what you do when you're not sure if it's paranoia or pattern. The next morning, another sign was nailed to my barn door. Not zip-tied, nailed. Under enforcement review, failure to comply will result in immediate action. That was when I knew. This wasn't about property values or noise complaints. This was something else, something organized. And whoever was running this little fake HOA army, they just declared a war. They didn't know how to fight .* the next day. I stopped pretending this was harmless. It wasn't a prank anymore. It wasn't paperwork. It was reconnaissance.c. People think veterans get paranoid after the service. They don't understand. It's not paranoia if someone actually is watching. It's training. It's pattern recognition. And every instinct I had told me a line was being crossed. So, I went to work. I pulled the old gear out of the storage chest, motion sensors, trail cameras, a few tools from contracts I wasn't supposed to talk about. Nothing fancy. Nothing illegal. Just enough to remind people that fences aren't suggestions. First, I set up the perimeter lights infrared. No visible glow, triggered by movement under 50 yards. Then came the silent alarms, fishing line across the fence posts, connected to small bells buried in buckets of dirt. Low tech, reliable, the kind of setup that doesn't make noise until it's already too late. As I worked, I caught myself humming. Not a song. Just a sound, a slow, rhythmic hum I hadn't made since Afghanistan. Funny thing about muscle memory. It doesn't care what country you're standing in. That night, I reviewed the footage from my trail cams. 3 frames caught movement near the eastern fence. Not animals too tall, too steady. 2 figures walking side by side, flashlights off, heads tilted like they were counting steps. They were mapping me. I didn't call Langston this time. Didn't see the point. Cops handle crime. This wasn't crime. This was preparation. When you've spent enough nights under fire, you learn to feel the shift before it happens. The temperature of the air changes. The birds go quiet. And somewhere in your gut, something starts coiling tight, waiting for the impact. So I prepared for impact. I reinforced the barn doors. Checked the locks on every window. Moved my truck to the far end of the property so the headlights wouldn't be visible from the road. Then I wired the porch lights to a manual trigger inside the kitchen, one switch to turn night into day. By the time the sun dipped behind the ridge, the ranch looked calm again. But underneath, it was wired like a trap. Not because I wanted a fight, but because I was done being surprised. I sat on the porch with Max curled beside me, the air still and heavy. Somewhere out in the dark, a coyote howled once, short and sharp. Then silence. The kind that doesn't comfort, it warns. And as I sipped my coffee and stared into the tree line, I realized something I hadn't felt in years. That old edge was back. The one that keeps you alive when everything familiar starts to look like an ambush. This wasn't just about defending a ranch anymore. It was about defending peace. And peace, real peace, always costs something. I just didn't know how much it would cost me yet. Asterisk. You don't forget the sound of trouble when it's trying to be quiet. There's a rhythm to it, a pattern the air recognizes before your brain does. Measured, careful, almost polite. Like footsteps that know they shouldn't be heard. That's what woke me before dawn. The clock on the knitstand. Read 4:23 a.m. too early for deliveries. Too late for neighbors. And out here, the only thing that moves before sunrise is trouble. Max lifted his head, ears twitching. Then came the sound, faint crunching gravel from the far side of the property. I slid out of bed, grabbed the flashlight, and poured yesterday's cold coffee into a mug. Old habits die slow. I didn't run for the gun safe. Didn't panic. Just listened. Crunch. Pause. Crunch, crunch. Multiple steps. Slow, coordinated. I walked to the kitchen window and flipped the light switch off. Darkness helps you think clearer. Through the slats, I could just make out shapes moving by the barn. 5 of them, maybe 6. Flashlights off, headlamps strapped tight. Khaki vests, earpieces, CLIPBOARDS. It would have been funny if it wasn't my land. Karen's little weekend army had returned. And this time, they came dressed like a low-budget SWAT team. I crouched near the side window, counting their movements. 3 were spreading east along the fence, where I'd wired the motion triggers. 2 hung back near the barn door, one holding what looked like a taser, the other with his hands on the radio dot. Then the one in front spoke, his voice low but clear enough for the wind to carry. Team Alpha in position. Begin sweep. Target presumed armed, but compliant under Phase 1. Target. Presumed armed. That's what they said about us overseas before the shooting started. I took a slow sip of coffee and smiled. They thought they were hunting. They didn't know they were walking into training ground. Click. One of them tripped the wire. And suddenly the night exploded. Every floodlight I'd rigged came alive at once, high beams slicing through the darkness like a stadium eruption. The sirens followed a split second later, 4 directions, overlapping frequencies designed to scramble your sense of direction. 2 of the intruders hit the dirt immediately. One screamed and dove behind the water trough. Another smacked his headlamp and yelled, "Abort! Abort!" Max barked like a gunshot, sprinting to the porch. And then, to everyone's surprise, but mine, Linda, my goat, decided she was done tolerating guests. She charged straight at one of the men crouched near the barn. He barely had time to yell before she rammed him square in the thigh and flipped him backward into the mud. I stepped onto the porch, not rushing, not hiding. Just a man with coffee and a look that said wrong move. "Morning, gentlemen," I called out. "Y'all planning to announce yourselves, or was this a surprise inspection?" One of them, a tall clipboard guy, stood up shaking. "We're acting under HOA Emergency Code 7A to seize non-compliant property." I raised an eyebrow. "Did y'all make that up in a coloring book?" He didn't answer. The shorter one raised a taser, voice cracking. "This is a citizen enforcement zone. You're required to comply." I took one step down from the porch. "Son, you're standing on my land, waving a toy, and quoting a rule book that doesn't exist. You might want to rethink your life choices." That's when headlights appeared at the end of the drive, flashing red and blue. The sound of tires on gravel cut through the chaos like a knife. Sheriff Langston, his cruiser rolled up slow, siren blipping once. He stepped out calm, hat in one hand, eyes scanning the scene. 6 grown adults frozen in my front yard like kids caught egging a house. "Callahan," he said, squinting. "What the hell am I looking at?" I pointed with my mug. "Neighborhood watch, apparently." Langston turned to the men. "Hands where I can see them." Drop the clipboards. One of them actually hesitated. "We're authorized by the Simmons Valley Compliance Board." Langston walked right up, grabbed the patch off his vest, and ripped it clean off. "This says Compliance Officer Tier 2. You print this at Kinko's?" He looked at me. "Tier 2? I asked. Langston shrugged. "Guess they've got ranks now." He opened one of their binders, flipping through laminated pages. Charts, maps, even what looked like an HOA hierarchy, field command, patrol lead, reintegration liaison. He stopped at one section and laughed. Class 2 violation. Unauthorized rooster activity. You gotta be kidding me. Clipboard guy tried to speak. We were told to enforce protocol. By who? Langston barked. The man swallowed. Mrs. Simmons. Of course. Langston's jaw tightened. You're all under arrest for trespassing, harassment, and impersonating enforcement officers. He looked at me. You okay? I nodded, mostly. My goat's still mad. As the deputies cuffed the group, one of them dropped a folder. Langston picked it up, flipping through the pages under his flashlight. Corinne's name's all over this, he muttered. And something else. Regional Oversight Program, Phase 2. You ever heard of that? I hadn't, but the seal on the document wasn't homemade. It was embossed, stamped, government issued. The sheriff met my eyes, and for the first time that morning, I saw something in his face I hadn't expected. Concern. Real concern. Callahan, he said quietly, this just got bigger than both of us. The squad car pulled away with the fake officers inside, headlights fading into the pale morning. The wind was still, the field littered with papers, broken headlamps, and one very satisfied goat chewing on a reflective vest. I stood there, mug half empty, the adrenaline finally catching up to me. For a brief moment, I thought it was over. But the thing about pulling weeds is if you don't dig up the roots, they grow back. And something told me Karen Simmons wasn't done planting *** for about 48 hours. It was quiet. Too quiet. The kind that feels like a stretched rubber band just before it snaps. Langston filed his reports, impounded the fake patrol's SUV, and promised to handle Corinne personally. But the problem with people like her is, they don't handle easy. They regroup. They reframe the story. It started small. Whispers at the feed store. Eyes that lingered too long at the gas station. The kind of small-town shift you only notice when you've been there long enough to recognize normal. Then the flyer showed up. Gray paper, printed cheap, stapled to every mailbox and fence post down my road. Each one had an aerial photo of my property, black and white, with the words, Zone B Non-Compliant Resident. Below that, unauthorized livestock, illegal fencing, verbal hostility toward enforcement officers. Refusal to reintegrate into the community at the bottom. In bold, neighbors are advised to avoid unsanctioned contact. I stood by my mailbox holding one, half laughing, half boiling. It was propaganda. Backyard authoritarianism printed on copy paper. But the worst part? It worked. By the next week. Half the people who used to wave from their trucks didn't. The feed store guy suddenly had price adjustments. Even the church. Groups stopped inviting me to their Sunday cookouts. Langston came by to check on me one afternoon. Cruiser idling in the drive. He leaned against the hood, hat low, eyes tired. She's poisoning the well, he said. I've seen cult leaders pull the same move. Isolate the target, make them look like the problem. I stared at the horizon, jaw tight. You think this is just her? Langston sighed. She's getting help. These flyers? They weren't printed at home. He was right. The paper stock was professional grade. The print quality too clean. Somebody was backing her, and not just emotionally. A few nights later, I found out how far she was willing to go. Max started barking again around midnight. I grabbed the flashlight and stepped out, heart already in that low, steady combat rhythm. Behind the barn, I found him whimpering near the ATV, paw bleeding. When I knelt to check, I saw the glass, thin, sharp shards scattered like bait. Not broken bottles, planted dot the kind of detail you don't miss when you've been trained to clear rooms in the dark. It wasn't an accident. It was a message. Langston came out within 20 minutes, crouched beside the barn, shaking his head. "This isn't neighborhood drama anymore," he said. "This is targeted." I didn't answer. I was busy pressing a bandage around Max's paw, whispering to calm him. When you spend years patching soldiers up, you get good at not shaking. But that night, I shook. Not from fear. From restraint. The next morning, I walked to the porch, and sitting dead center on the table was an envelope. No stamp, no return address. Just my name. Written in neat block letters. Inside was a single printed notice. Cease hostile activity. Attend re-education seminar, mandatory. Time and location. Karen's garage. And below that, in bold red font, failure to attend will result in community. Isolation Tier 3. I laughed so hard I almost spilled my coffee. A re-education seminar in a suburban garage. She'd turned delusion into doctrine. But beneath the absurdity, something cold pressed in. Karen wasn't alone anymore. She'd built followers. A movement. That evening, Langston came by again, this time with a folder in hand. "Financial records," he said. "Her HOAs tied to a shell nonprofit, Community Horizon Outreach. They've got a grant trail that leads way past county lines." I flipped through the documents, signatures, transfers, stamped approvals. Real seals. Federal-level formatting. This wasn't just a control freak with a clipboard. This was organized manipulation, an experiment in how far people could be pushed under the illusion of order. Langston sighed. "You need to be careful. Whatever this is, she's not the top of it." I looked out at the fields, at the fences I'd built by hand, and felt that same low-hum return under my ribs. It wasn't fear. It was focus. Because if Karen thought she could turn neighbors into soldiers and freedom into paperwork, then she'd just given me the reason I needed to stop holding back. And this time, I wouldn't be waiting on the porch. 3 nights after the glass in the barn incident. The mail carrier left something strange in my box. A flat, unmarked envelope stamped certified. No sender, no return address. Just my name. I carried it to the porch, tore it open, and froze. Inside was a printed report, stamped with a seal I recognized. Not local, not state, federal, regional initiative, rural behavioral management, phase 2. My name wasn't on the first page, but I didn't need it to be. I'd seen this structure before. The language, the formatting, the subtle bureaucratic coldness. I'd helped write parts of something like this years ago. During my last military assignment, it wasn't supposed to exist anymore. Document outlined community, pilot programs designed to enhance social cohesion through compliance, modeling, translation, control through fear and policy. You start by creating small, believable structures, an HOA, a citizen group, a coalition. Then you test how far people will obey rules that don't exist. It hit me like a punch to the gut. Karen wasn't a fanatic acting alone. She was a field test. I called Langston immediately. He showed up half an hour later, headlights cutting through the dark like a blade. I handed him the folder. He flipped through the pages, brow furrowing deeper with every line. Where'd you get this? Mailbox, I said. No fingerprints, no return address. He nodded slowly. This language, I've seen something like it. County security memo last year. Pilot project. Community management initiative. Same people? Could be. Could also be something bigger. He didn't have to say what we were both thinking. If it's bigger, that means it's funded. And if it's funded, it's protected. We spent the next 2 days digging. Langston used his clearance to trace Corinne's fake HOA filings. I followed the paper trail behind Community Horizon Outreach, the nonprofit funding her flyers and patrols. What we found didn't make sense. Overlapping P.O. boxes, off-the-grid bank accounts, and a payment authorization stamped from a building in D.C. Karen Simmons wasn't the mastermind. She was the messenger. On the third night, Langston showed up again. No uniform this time, just a flashlight and a grim look. You're gonna want to see this, he said. We drove out to Corinne's house. No lights on, no movement, but her SUV was parked in the driveway. Langston handed me the warrant, signed that afternoon. We knocked once. No answer. Knocked again. Curtains moved. Finally, the door opened, and there she was. Same pink blazer, same calm smile, like none of this had happened. You have a warrant? She asked. Langston held it up. We do. You're making a mistake, she said. You first, I replied. Inside, it was a shrine to control. Walls lined with binders, labeled in color-coded stickers. Resident Tier Guide, compliance scripts, correctional language index. She'd built a whole fake government inside her house. Then Langston found it. A sliding panel behind her bookshelf. Behind it, a narrow room lit by a single monitor still flickering on standby. On the walls, maps, photos, timelines. 3 of the live feeds showed different properties in our county. One of them was mine. My porch, my barn, my gate. Langston stared at the screen, jaw tight. She's been surveilling you. I looked closer. Not just me. Look, those other names. Each photo had a label. Status, compliant. Status, exit achieved. Status, pending disruption. Langston's hand trembled slightly as he flipped open a binder, titled Phase 3, Escalation Protocols. Inside were typed instructions on adjusting pressure, inducing social isolation, and controlled opposition narratives. I said, That's not HOA language. He nodded. No, that's psychological operations talk. And just like that, everything clicked. This wasn't about fences, goats, or signs. It was about behavior modification. They weren't enforcing. They were experimenting. We gathered every file, every binder, every drive. By morning, Corinne was in cuffs. Langston turned her house into a temporary evidence scene. But before she was driven off, she looked at me through the cruiser window, not angry, not scared, smiling. Do you really think this ends with me? She asked. I didn't answer, because I already knew the truth. The deeper we dug, the stranger it got. One of the federal logos from her documents matched the header on my old clearance. ID. It wasn't just similar, it was identical. That night, sitting alone at the kitchen table, I opened one of the drives we'd seized. Inside were PDFs labeled with phases. Phase 1, infiltration. Phase 2, conditioning. Phase 3. Pressure. Each phase had real case files. Homeowners, small business owners, even churches. They called them behavioral resistance nodes. And right there, in the middle of the list, was my name. Subject: Callahan. James, classification: autonomous, high resistance. Influential risk factor. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Because suddenly, it wasn't about Corinne anymore. She hadn't found me by accident. Someone had chosen me. Because I'd once helped build the blueprint, they were now using to break people. I realized then I wasn't fighting against the HOA. I was fighting against my own past. Asterisk. They did not this time. No fake badges. No laminated flyers. No SUVs you could still laugh at. 3 nights after we cracked Corinne's files, the cameras picked them up first. Grainy silhouettes moving in the tree line. Too smooth, too quiet to be her clipboard commandos. Thermal showed them crouched low, waiting. 7 signatures total. 3 approached from the west fence, 2 from the creek bed, 2 straight up the driveway. Black vests, boots, walkies muted, rifles slung tight. Real rifles this time. Max growled low under the table. I shut the laptop, stood up slow, and went to the mudroom. This wasn't HOA cosplay anymore. This was a raid. I slipped on the coat with the trigger switch in the pocket. Took one last sip of cold coffee. Then I stepped out onto the porch like it was any other morning. The air was heavy with that strange stillness before a storm. You don't just hear it, you feel it. A pressure on your skin, a hum in your ribs. The first man stepped into the yard, clipboard gone, rifle up, eyes scanning. "We're here for seizure protocol," he called out. "You think this is legal?" I asked. He didn't blink. "You've failed to comply with re-education notices. Your property is forfeitable under Emergency Clause B9. The man to his right twitched, kept adjusting his grip, glancing at the tree line. The one on the left, calm, too calm, eyes glossy and locked on the door behind me. "You're outnumbered," clipboard gone guy said. "Don't make this hard." I took one slow step forward. "Tell me something," I said. He hesitated. "What?" "Who trained you?" That flicker of confusion, the half-second pause, told me everything. They weren't cops. They weren't military. They were believers. I tapped the silent trigger in my pocket. Across the driveway, the steel barriers hissed up from the ground like teeth. Motion sensors pinged. Floodlights didn't come on steady. They strobed red, disorienting, turning the yard into a pulsing nightmare. Twitchy guy raised his rifle. That was his mistake. Got my deck rig kicked in. 2 flashbangs deployed from opposite corners. No shrapnel. Just light and pressure loud enough to scramble your brain for 30 seconds. They dropped like marionettes with cut strings. The calm one tried to run, but stopped dead when he saw the silhouette at the end of the driveway, Langston's cruiser. No siren, no lights, just his voice cutting through the chaos. "Weapons down, now." He stepped out, sidearm drawn, 2 deputies behind him. Clipboard gone guy twitched toward his vest. Langston fired a warning shot into the dirt. A puff of dust between the man's boots. A sound cracked like a whip. I said now. Langston barked. They dropped their weapons one by one, 7 in total emerging from the woods, hands up. Up close, they were a mess. Gear mismatched, eyes wide, adrenaline shaking through their fingers. Not pros. Fanatics. As the deputies cuffed them. The quiet one, the one who'd stayed calm, turned his head and looked straight at me. He smiled, just a little. "You think it ends here?" He said softly. "You think this was about land?" I didn't answer. He leaned closer to the cruiser window as they loaded him in. "It's about pattern disruption. You're not the enemy. You're the prototype." Then he winked and was gone. Langston walked over, jaw clenched. "They said Corinne's playbook was Phase 4 certified. You know what that means?" I stared at the strobing lights cooling down across my yard. "I do now," I said quietly, because Phase 4 didn't mean ending the program. It meant testing what happened when someone fought back. And tonight, they'd just gotten their data. Asterisk by dawn, the yard was quiet again. Only the smell of burnt gunpowder and dust hung in the air. The deputies hauled away the last of the gear clipboards, radios, rifles that would all trace back to nowhere. Langston lingered on the porch, coffee in hand, his eyes scanning the horizon like he expected more shadows to crawl out of it. "You ever think it'd end like this?" he asked. I laughed once, short and tired. I stopped believing in endings a long time ago. He left not long after, squad car disappearing down the gravel road, leaving behind the same silence that started all of this. But it didn't feel like peace anymore. It felt. Watched Dot inside. I turned on the laptop, plugged in the last encrypted drive we'd found. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then a logo blinked onto the screen. OPRM Operational Rural Management. I froze. That was my old program. A prototype we'd built overseas to study post-conflict communities. Except it wasn't supposed to be used here. Not on civilians. Not on home soil. The drive held files labeled Phase 1, infiltration. Phase 2, conditioning. Phase 3, pressure. Phase 4, correction. Each one filled with photos, audio logs, reports, not just mine, hundreds. Every property Corinne's group monitored. Every homeowner labeled as a data point. Every act of resistance recorded. Then came the final video file, message_tier alpha.mp4. Corinne appeared on screen, calm as ever, sitting in front of a plain white wall. "If you're watching this," she said, "and you've seen the truth. I didn't start this, but I believed in it, still do. People like you don't obey, you disrupt. And that's why we needed you. You showed us how resistance behaves." She smiled once, then the screen went black. For a long time, I just sat there, staring at my reflection in the dark screen. I wasn't angry anymore, just steady, because it all made sense now. They hadn't picked me by mistake. They'd chosen me because I fought back. Because I'd built part of the system, they were now perfecting. By noon, I'd written a report, every file, every timestamp, every recording. I sent it to the Federal Oversight Board with one note. This program isn't behavioral management. It's weaponized obedience. Then I hit publish. The story went live within hours. And just like that, the silence broke. Calls came in from journalists, veterans, whistleblowers, people who'd seen pieces of the same thing in their towns. Within days, hearings opened. Corinne was indicted again, this time on federal charges. The program was officially decommissioned. Officially. Out here, life settled back into something like normal. Max healed, though he still limps when the weather turns cold. The goats yell at sunrise like they always have. The fences hold, but sometimes, when a truck slows near the gate or a drone hums a little too low, I feel it again, that quiet tension that never really leaves. Peace isn't something you find. It's something you defend. And if there's one thing the military taught me, it's this: freedom doesn't end when the war does. It ends when you stop paying attention, Doc. So I keep watching. Because somewhere out there, another pilot program is already starting. And they're looking for their next prototype. They thought they could study me, test me, break me. But you can't program freedom, not with drones, laws, or fear. You can cage a man, but not his will. Out here, the land remembers who fights for it, and who folds. So if they come again, they'll find the same thing they did last time: a soldier who's done hiding, and a home that fights back.